All right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is Friday, August 7th, and this is the Daily Power Parsha. I'm your host, Rabbi Ari, and it's great to have you here to study a little bit of Torah to get us going on this Friday as we enter Shabbat. So we're going to focus on the 6th and 7th readings of the Torah portion of Eikev, which is, of course, our Torah portion this week. So I'm going to pull up my screen, and we're going to explore it together and hopefully walk away with some meaningful ideas and meaningful lessons. Okay, here we go. Hold on. Nope. All right, Eikev number 6. And it jumps straight into the land of Israel discussion, a discussion about the Holy Land. Chapter 11 of Deuteronomy, verse number 10, here we go. For the land to which you are coming to possess, says Moses to the people, is not like the land of Egypt out of which you came, where you sowed your seed and which you watered by foot like a vegetable garden. So here Moses does some comparison, comparing and contrasting between Egypt and Israel. It's not like Egypt, says Moses, but the land to which you pass to possess, in other words, the one that you're going to cross over the Jordan to possess, is a land of mountains and valleys and absorbs water from the rains of heaven. So that becomes the first primary distinction. Difference between Egypt, that's irrigated, watered by foot, and Israel that gets irrigated by the rains of the heaven. So to explain, the commentaries tell us what this means, and it's something very pragmatic. So in Egypt, it's a very arid climate. It doesn't rain a lot. So how do things grow in Egypt? So they use the Nile River. At least they used to. I'm not sure. I'm not up to date on modern Egyptian farming techniques. But back in the day, they would take the Nile River, and they would create little channels, little aqueducts from the Nile River that would then go and irrigate the land. So it would basically be an overflowing of the river. They would, dig and create a flow of the river that would then go into the land, through channels and systems to then irrigate and create growth, creating fertile land. I believe there are some parts of that area are called the Fertile Crescent, and it's essentially due to the Nile River. So the water is coming from below, from the earth, so to speak. It's coming from the river itself. I mean, I guess rivers collect rain from above and other sources, but I don't know, maybe the Nile River not. Either way, bottom line is, in Egypt, you don't need to pray for rain. All you need to do is dig some pipes or dig some channels for the water to go. When it comes to Israel, however, you're reliant on the rains of heaven, which means that there's going to be a little bit more prayer. So this is the first theme of today's conversation, the self-made person versus the divinely leaning individual. Somebody who believes that they are at the source of their own success, or they are the source of their own success, or that the material stuff around us is the source of that success, versus the person who believes that God is in control, that everything comes from above, quite literally. The rains, and who controls the rains? No, not a foreign country, not the CIA seeding the clouds. No, this would be an understanding that God is in control, and therefore we pray to God for the rain to fall. So the difference between Egypt and Israel, understood in this kind of deeper sense, is the difference between a self-reliant individual versus someone who recognizes God's force. It's the difference between the spiritual narcissist versus the spiritually humble. It's the difference between the Egyptian, who believes that they're in control and therefore they can subjugate other peoples, etc., versus the Jew, ideally, right? This is the ideal, who believes that God's in control, so who am I to, God forbid, harm anybody else? Stark distinctions being brought in these first two verses. Okay, next verse, number 12. And then Moses continues to describe the land. He calls it the land or a land, start again. A land the Lord your God looks after. So in the Hebrew, the word is doresh. Doresh means kind of like it means to inquire, to study, to examine. It's a land that God examines. Look, God created everything. The heavens and the earth, everything. But God has a thing for Israel. God has a thing. God is specifically inquiring, specifically focused on Israel. And take a look at what the Torah continues to say. The eyes of Lord your God, or the Lord your God, are always upon it. The eyes of God are always upon the land of Israel, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. This was one of the very popular responses that the Lubavitcher Rebbe would give to people who asked, is Israel safe? Is it safe to go, to travel, to live, to send my kid to yeshiva there or seminary there? In the Gulf War, the Rebbe was asked, do you remember the Gulf War? Early 90s, 90 or 91, Saddam Hussein, whatever. Okay, Scud missiles pointed at Israel, right? Dozens of Scud missiles fired and no casualties, pretty much. I think one person may have died or something, but it wasn't a direct. Anyway, what's the point? Point is that at that time, as in other times during wars, etc., people would ask the Rebbe, is Israel safe? The Rebbe's response was always this verse: is Israel safe? Israel's the safest place on earth, because the Torah says the eyes of God are always upon the land from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. There's no other land that God is so focused on. So if you believe in God, if you believe in Torah, if you believe that God watching something is a good thing, well then, if all of those are true, then the conclusion is, yeah, Israel's okay. It's okay to go, it's okay to live, it's okay to be there. Now, does it mean that nothing bad happens in Israel? Of course not. Tragedies happen everywhere. God, we know that Rahman al-Islan, God save us, there is and always has been and has been for many, many years threats of terrorism and acts of terrorism. We know that, right? I'm not being naive about that, but there's acts of violence everywhere. And overall, the Rebbe would point to this verse and say Israel is the safest place to be. By the way, this is parenthetical. You might be wondering, well, what about the Lubavitcher Rebbe in Israel? How come he didn't move to Israel? How come he didn't live in Israel? Maybe you're wondering that. Maybe you wondered that before, maybe in this context. The Rebbe was very strong, a very strong lover of the land of Israel, as I believe every Jew is. It's a homeland. It's God's gift. It's a beautiful thing. I know what Seth Rogen said last week. I know what he said, and I'm sure we could have a schmooze with him, and he would tell you how he really feels. And
I don't know what he said. What did he say?
Seth Rogen was saying, he was kind of joking around on a podcast about, do Jews really need Israel? It's a pain in the neck. We'd be safer if we kind of spread out, not gather all together in one spot. Anyway, he was being a little cynical on it. And the point is, coming from a Jew, it's a little bit disappointing. But listen, this is not jumping on him or into that. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, Israel means and has meant so much to our people. It's our historical land. It's the Holy Land. It's God's land. So people ask now, ask before. People ask the Rebbe directly. Why not? Why didn't the Rebbe move to Israel like many great rabbis? And the Rebbe said that he feels that his mission is to be a leader, is to help the diaspora Jews, the Jews that don't live in the Holy Land. They need some encouragement, some uplifting. There are many wonderful rabbis in Israel, and Israel is the Holy Land. Everyone has a mission, right? Everyone has a shlichut in their life. Everyone has their divinely ordained mission. And the Rebbe felt that his mission was to specifically be there for the Jews that are in a not so holy land, to inspire them to a place to make this place a little bit more Israel-like. In other words, to introduce a little bit more holiness here. Okay, so and the Rebbe cited the example of Joseph as opposed to Joseph's brothers. So there were 12 sons of Jacob. 11 of them lived for a long time in Israel. One of them, due to very complicated circumstances, as you well know, ended up in Egypt as the viceroy. So it's kind of like there's two types of Jews. There's the Israel Jews, and then there's the Jews that are out there in the world and, putting on the suit every day and going to work and doing their thing. But Joseph, even as he was in Egypt, he's still Yosef HaTzadik. He's still the righteous Joseph, who then sets the stage for the diaspora life. The first time that we lived in the diaspora as a people was when the family of Yaakov, Jacob's family, came down to move to Egypt during the famine to live with Joseph. Now that ended in slavery, right? That didn't end well until the Exodus, right? So it took a negative turn. But the notion of moving out of Israel into a diaspora community, that path was forged then, and Joseph was the tzaddik, the righteous person who kind of created that formula. So anyway, that's kind of the model that the Rebbe cited for this idea of shepherding or leading or inspiring Jews of the diaspora. Okay, so just in case you were wondering, or in case you thought about it before, let's continue. Now, here we go. So it says that God's eyes are upon the land from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. Okay, interesting. But what happens the next year? Right? So from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah, God's eyes are upon the land, and then it happens again, and then again, and then it repeats. So then why not just say God's eyes are constantly upon the land? Why does it use this weird phrase? You understand my question? Why does it say that God's eyes are on the land from the beginning of the year to the end of the year? Why not just say God's eyes are on the land? I'm sorry, it already says that. It says the eyes of the Lord your God are always upon it. Why not just end there? Always. Always means always. There you go. Beginning of the year, end of the year, middle of the year, always is always. Why qualify it by calling it beginning of the year and end of the year? So in Kabbalah it explains something very interesting, and it takes it away from the specific context of a discussion about Israel and makes it kind of a broader conversation about God's providence over the world. And the understanding in Kabbalah is that God invests in creation, in the world, 1 year at a time. So in Rosh Hashanah, God invests, once again, the energy flow to the world for that 1 year. And at the end of the year, there's an assessment. And God says, okay, do I want to invest again? And that's why we show up in Rosh Hashanah and we pray to God and we say, we want you, God. Choose us. We choose you. We're going to make you. We're going to coronate you, proclaim you king. That's one of the most popular. It's one of the refrains of the prayers in Rosh Hashanah. We refer to God as King, Hamelech, the King. In other words, we are asking God to invest, and then we blow the shofar, which is the kind of the coronation, our proclamation of God as in control, and then God once again reinvests. But the investment is always from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, and then it needs to be renewed. That keeps us on our toes, right? It's like a grant that you get, a 1-year grant. You want it again? All right. What have you been doing with the money? What did you do with the investment? Right? Were you successful in your endeavors? Not successful? What needs to be improved? Otherwise, if it's if it's open-ended, then there's no accountability. So this way, God creates a certain measure of accountability, and this is why, as you and I know, Rosh Hashanah is a time of introspection. The month of El, which is the month that precedes Rosh Hashanah, is a time of, taking stock. How have we done with the investment that God has given us, with life and resources, etc.? What are we going to do this year? We make new resolutions on Rosh Hashanah, and it's all about this same notion that there is some sort of renewing that happens.
That month now, the pre-month.
Almost, we're almost there.
Oh,
we're almost there. We're right now in the month of Menachem Av, which is the month right before that month of El, and we are well into the month. In fact, today is the 17th day of the month of Av. So, for reference, We have 13 more days. And then, next thing you know, we're getting ready for Rosh Hashanah, for this renewal. So this verse really helps us understand the theme of Rosh Hashanah, which is a new year, new investment, new opportunity, new commitments on our end, introspection preceding that, good resolutions, and that's where it comes from. Okay, now verse 13 begins. You might recognize this in the Hebrew, V'haya im Shema tishma'u, which is the second paragraph of the Shema. So last week we read in the Torah reading we had the opening line of Shema in the first paragraph, and here in this week's Torah portion, right here we have the second paragraph of the Shema. So what does it talk about? It basically talks about us doing what we need to do and God blessing us. And if we don't do what we need to do, then the opposite's going to happen. So let's do a quick read. And it will be if you hearken to my commandments that I command you this day, to love the Lord your God and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. Then, now Moses is channeling God, so to speak. And they're speaking like as though God were speaking. So then God says, I will give you the rain of your land at its time, the early rain and the latter rain. If you're a farmer, so you know that you need early rain for some crops. Early in the season, you need latter rain for other crops. And you will gather in your grain, your wine, and your oil. So not only will the rain fall, not only will it grow, but it's going to not get, maybe animals won't come in and attack it or whatever it is. You'll also gather it in a healthy fashion. And I will give grass in your field for your livestock, and you will eat and be sated. These are very good rewards, by the way, if you are in an agricultural society. If pretty much, a lot of people are farmers, etc. So these are really good blessings. For a person that's a business person, a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, an entrepreneur, whatever, a rabbi. So the blessing of, do the mitzvah and you'll get grass in your field for your livestock. Like, all right, I hear that. Okay, for some that's good, right? All right. But of course we know, just all joking aside, we know that for all of this to run, you need the fields, you need the grass, you need the grain, you need the wine, you need the oil, right? Okay. So, and now comes the flip side. Beware, be careful, lest your heart be misled and you turn away and worship strange gods and prostrate, bow down yourselves before them. And the wrath of the Lord will be kindled against you, and he will close off the heavens, and there will be no rain, and the ground will not give its produce, and you will perish quickly from upon the good land that the Lord gives you. And here is, once again, a prophecy, warning, a cautionary note, whatever you want to call it, about us turning away from God. And Moses is saying that's not going to be good for you, not only spiritually, disconnection is not good, but physically also, it's not going to be good. And you shall set these words of mine upon your heart and upon your soul, and bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be for ornaments between your eyes. This refers to the mitzvah of tefillin, phylacteries, right, that are placed on the arm, arm, and on the head between the eyes. And of course now we have education, the mitzvah of chinuch, and you shall teach them to your sons to speak with them. Oh, by the way, sons is not gender specific. There's a mitzvah to teach your daughters Torah also, just FYI. You shall teach them to your sons to speak with them when you sit in your house, when you walk on the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. So, also this, in general, Torah study is always, but this also refers to the Shema. It's a meta conversation about saying the Shema, and we say it twice a day. When you lie down, before you go to bed, say the Shema, and when you rise. In the morning, we also say the Shema. So in general, this verse is about Torah study, but we also understand this referring to the saying of this very paragraph of the Shema. And you shall inscribe them, this is the mezuzah, upon the doorposts of your house and upon your gates, doorposts. The Hebrew for that is mezuzot, plural, mezuzah, singular, in order that your days may increase and the days of your children on the land which the Lord swore to your forefathers to give them as the days of heaven upon the earth. In other words, if you want to thrive in Israel and live a happy, healthy, successful life, make sure to keep your end of the covenant. Again, that is a theme that repeats itself in this book, a theme that is constant. It's not even repeating itself, it's just the constant theme. All right, and let's finish the Torah portion. 4 verses remaining. All right, here we go. This is tomorrow's reading. 4. Moses says, if you keep all these commandments which I command you to do them, to love the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, and to cleave to him, then, right? What do I get? What do I get? Okay. Then the Lord will drive out all these nations from before you, and you will possess nations greater and stronger than you. Every place which the soles of your feet will tread will be yours, from the desert and the Lebanon, from the river, the Euphrates River, and until the western sea, that will be your boundary. No man will stand up before you. The Lord your God will cast the fear of you and the dread of you in all the land upon which you tread, as he spoke to you. You have nothing to fear. If you walk with God, you have nothing to fear. If you walk alone, you're walking alone. I want to connect this one final point of connection. Story of Purim is pretty well known. The story of Esther, Queen Esther, Mordechai, the king Achashverosh, the wicked advisor Haman. It's got all the makings of a classic plot, classic Jewish plot, which ends with a celebration, a holiday, and some pastries. So it ends well. But in the middle, there was a very severe decree. And the Talmud asked the question, what did the Jews do to deserve such a decree? At that point in time, all the Jews were living in one country, or under one nation's rule. There were no Jews in Australia, in South America, or even North America. Jews were concentrated under the Persian Empire. The Persian Empire consisted of 127 different countries and nationalities. They had a very large swath of land under their control. Every living Jew lived under Persian rule. So when Haman came to Achashverosh, the king, and he said, hey, can you let me do what I'd like to do with the Jews? Destroy them, God forbid. Man, woman, and child, by the way, in one day. And the king says yes. That's a pretty terrible decree. Never in Jewish history have Jewish people been under such utter and absolute threat. Had that gone through, it couldn't have gone through, because God has a plan, right? But what Haman wanted to do, unprecedented. Not even Pharaoh, no one had wanted and had the ability to do what Haman and Achashverosh, agreed to, at least initially, to do. You think about the Holocaust. Thank God not everyone was living in one place, right? Yeah. So the Talmud asks, what could have possibly spiritually triggered such a decree? And the Talmud says it's because they went to the feast of Achashverosh. The book of Esther opens with the king throwing a party, and he invites people, and so the Jewish community went. And the Talmud says because they went to the party, that's why the decree was over their heads. Now they eventually, came back and God took away the decree, but that's why it was triggered in the first place. So the Rebbe asked the question, because they went to a feast, they deserve such a thing, even potentially? It doesn't make any sense. And it's not. And what was wrong with going to the feast in the first place? What are you thinking? Unmute yourself. What would you think is what was wrong with them going to the feast? What do you think they did wrong with that?
Was it celebrating God?
No. The feast was by the Persian king, celebrating his own accomplishments, whatever. But what do you think was so wrong with the Jewish people going to that feast? What might you imagine? What did they do wrong at the feast? Perhaps. So people maybe typically think that maybe they ate non-kosher. Maybe they ate non-kosher, maybe that. But first of all, not kosher, okay, but it's not. That doesn't trigger that. Number one. Number two, there was kosher at the meal at the feast. There was even kosher wine. So what's going on here? The Rebbe explains, it wasn't about the food. It was simply this. Why did the Jews go to the feast? Because they felt that by going there, finally they would normalize their standing in the country, in the empire. Finally, the Jews are not going to be separate. Finally, they'll be part of the regular people. They're going to assimilate and become one with the Persian Empire. And in doing so, finally they'll be protected. Finally they'll have, because they'll be integrated, they'll be protected. So God says, okay, so you want to put your hope in Achashverosh and the king? You don't need me anymore? You got him, he's got you, you got him? Okay, then I step back. We know the Jewish people are compared to the one sheep amid 70 wolves. 70, as you and I know, we've discussed it before, is the biblical count of countries, of nations on the earth. So it says we're one sheep amid 70 wolves. If not for the shepherd, we're done for. Right? God forbid. So we need the shepherd. But what happens if the sheep says, no, you know what, I've made friends with the wolves. I don't need you anymore. The shepherd says, you sure? Yeah, we're good. Okay, so then I'm going to go to a lunch break. And then you're trusting the wolves. With the history of being a wolf. Right? With all of the history. Right? Prior performance is very often indicative of future results when it comes to wolf-like behavior. So God says, you think that he's got you? Okay, then I'm stepping back. And then what happens is Haman, the advisor, speaks to him. He says, get rid of the Jews. He says, all right, fine, that also works. And there you go. So it's not a punishment as much as it is a natural consequence. If you put your faith in something else, well, then that's what you got, for better, for worse. Until the Jews turned back to God and said, you know what, actually, if you don't mind, we could use some help. And then God's like, okay, fine, I got you. And that turned everything around. But that's how we understand it. So what's the point? The point is, this is the theme of what Moses is saying as well at the end of this Torah portion. Moses says, if you follow in the ways, if you walk with God, God's got you. And you'll be strong, and you'll be successful, you'll be happy in your country, in your nation. The other nations won't start up with you, it'll be good. But if you turn away, and you put your faith in other stuff, well then you better hope that they got your back, because that's, if you put your hope in something else, then you'll see what you get. Anyway, that's how it ends. But let's end on a positive note. If we're plugged in, God will have our backs. All right, make sense? Trust in God. Even the money says that, by the way. I know, even cynical, secular United States of America, the money still says it. In God we trust. I'm shocked by that, by the way. Let's not make this clip go viral now. I am not calling for this. I'm just saying that given everything, right? It's actually, I find it compelling that the money still says, in God we trust. I know that you can't have 10 commandments in public spaces, in government, separation church and state. Again, I'm not raising flags to Mark is like, wait a second, should we start rolling this campaign out? No, I'm not saying to roll out the campaign. I'm just saying it's like the last bastion. People put their trust in money, right? In money we trust. But what does the money say? In God we trust. So let's learn from the money and let's trust in God. All right, that's it for today. Questions, comments? What you got? Mark?
Yes.
Sandrine, go ahead.
I have two. So the first one, you said before to teach your son, and you say also your daughter.
Yes.
But here you have in the Rayenu, it say unusually to your children. Is it Benechem?
Yeah. It says, it uses the masculine, but like I said, the understanding is that it's not, that it's for both. So in Chayenu it does say children, right? Not sons?
Yes.
Yeah, I like that translation better. Now the Hebrew uses the gender, but like I told you yesterday, sometimes the masculine is used for the catch-all. Why can't I find this now? Hold on. Here we go. Benechem, which literally means sons, but children.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, literally means sons, but benechem would be sons, but techem, beni or bt. So the N sound would be sons, the T sound would be daughters, but again, the gender sometimes is not specific with the masculine being the catch-all. By the way, when God proposed the Torah to the Jewish people, the first ones that were approached were the women before the men. Just so you know. So there's not listen, I'm sure in shtetl times, there have been times in history when things weren't so easy, when things were tough, when resources were limited, that maybe schools were allocated for the boys over the girls. Now, why was that the case? We could have a debate about that. I don't know that I could. I'm not justifying it, by the way. I'm just saying that that's probably, with limited resources and allocation, that's probably how things fell at a certain point in time, which may have created the impression, that it's, for the boys should study Torah, but not the girls. But that's never been true. Even if due to poverty or whatever it is, that might have played out, that's not the way, so to speak. So that's why, Baruch Hashem, today, schools are, across the board, and yeshivot and seminaries, boys and girls, and that's the deal. And all of us, of course, as you know, we're all here together, as you know, all of our Torah study, except for the ones that are women only, by the way, I should point out, but I'm not bitter at all about that. Anyway, but all of our stuff is always for both. Now, I have a dollar bill, a rare dollar bill, because who carries money anymore, especially now? What's money
Rabbi?
for? So, where does it say in God we trust? Does it not say that? Oh yeah, no, it does. There we go. I'm like, wait a second, is my whole point out the window? No. Right there, above the one. In God we trust. It's kind of shocking. It's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's wonderful. Have you heard of any campaign about separation of church and state and the money? No, I've never heard that.
No, but I think I'm in the legal minority on this. There is a debate about, I guess, the establishment clause, because the one that the separation of church and state was in a long letter by Thomas Jefferson that's a little bit more nuanced than I was talked about. But specifically, there's some people who expand the word establishment that says any government action that has a tinge of religiosity is akin to establishment, versus, establishment meant the government can't establish
a state mandated religion, right? Yeah.
So there's a hefty legal debate on this.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, the Supreme Court has weighed in on this a few times, and there are justices who have written in the minority that the notion of an absolute wall of separation between church and state is actually going against the not the establishment piece of it, but the other part of it, which is the free exercise, right? Because if you make it that government funding only goes one direction, let's say for schools, but does not at all help, parochial religious schools, whatever, then you're making it disadvantageous to practice of faith.
Say that there's a Supreme Court case a couple of weeks ago that came out regarding a task scholarship program in Montana that was specifically barred from religious schools, and the Supreme Court ruled if you had this generalized task scholarship program, you can't bar certain schools.
Interesting.
And that overturned something called the Blaine Amendment, which was originally an anti-Catholic amendment, because I think during the 1800s there were Catholic schools coming up, and a lot of the Protestants didn't like that. But now that amendment basically got removed, at least in that case, and I'm pretty sure there could be other cases that might more broadly remove that amendment.
Yeah, it's a complicated. The language there is complicated. I've taught classes on that. I've taught classes on that before from a Jewish perspective, but also touching on the legal piece of it. It's interesting. Anyway, all right, good. Any other?
I just found out that Rabbi Adin Evan Israel Steinsoll passed away.
Just passed away. Yeah. Yeah. A giant, a Torah scholar giant. The first person for 2,000 years to translate the Talmud, the entire Talmud, both Babylonian and Jerusalem, I think also, into multiple languages. And he's truly tremendous scholar. A Chabad Chassid. He grew up not religious. He discovered he grew up to a secular Israeli family. I think he discovered connect with Chabad or something, whatever. I mean, this is talking about decades ago, obviously. He passed away, he was like in his 80s, 86 or 83.
83.
83. Yeah. And he connected with Chabad, and he went to yeshiva, and then the rest is history. He was extremely well versed in not only Judaism, but also not only Torah, but also science and mathematics and everything. Just a really, really smart, a bona fide genius. For those
we used his Tanya.
I was just going to say, Mark, I was just going to mention that I'm looking on my shelf right now. He wrote a few translations of Tanya that are phenomenal. Phenomenal. It's not like a literal translation, it's more of like a conceptual work on it, but he never got through the whole thing. I actually spoke with, as he was getting older, so his son took over kind of like publishing on his behalf, helping him publish, and then there's like a whole team and all that stuff that was working with him. So one of the representatives of the publisher actually came to Atlanta for some sort of show or fair or conference last year, and I met with him at Chabad. And so I told him, listen, you got to finish Tanya. You gotta get the word back to whoever needs to know. We got to finish Tanya. He's like, yeah, they know about it, whatever. Working on it. I don't know. I don't know what's gonna, I don't know where things are holding now. But you know what? Let me take you over to my bookshelf. I love doing that. Right? Didn't I do that a few days ago? I think so. Mm-hmm. Right, when things were burning. Okay, so let me show you my Steinsaltz.
I was on YouTube. I couldn't see.
Oh, on YouTube. Oh, right. Sorry. Apologies. So here's my partial Tanya shelf. Some Hebrew Tanyas, Tanya in English, bilingual edition. This is what we're using right now, Lessons in Tanya, for the Thursday night class. But these are his works. Opening the Tanya, learning from the Tanya, understanding the Tanya. 3 volumes, but all different names. I always found that a little weird. Instead of calling it volume 1, volume 2, volume 3, they keep each one a different title, slightly different title, which is a little bit complicated for the reader. But now I want to show you his Talmud, because I have a set of his Talmud here.
Wow.
Oh, surprise me like that, man. Okay, so here, these books right here, the gray, the set right down here is.
I think I read 63 volumes.
The Talmud itself has 63 tractates, but they combine some of them in this. So I'll show you. This looks like a nice cover. Sukkah. I'll show you.
Is it like a new edition?
It's a new edition. He did his translation.
Recent, like this one.
Yeah, this is recent. This is very recent. He did a version decades ago, but it was updated and newly set. He has pictures. He has scientific conversations. It's very much very user friendly. You could pretty much read, and he doesn't get too bogged down with the Talmudic like back and forth and this commentary, that commentary. The Art Scroll does have some of that. Different like Art Scroll. That's another publisher. So they do get into that, more detailed. So if that's what you're looking for when you're studying Talmud, then that's where to go. But what he does is he just gives you. He chooses a path, and he gives you the path. He gives you a clear way of understanding Talmud. You read it, you get it. He throws a little bit of commentary on the sides, but the clarity is his focus. Just giving you a way to learn it and understand it and move through it. So, anyway,
It's in Hebrew?
No, it's English.
It's commentary?
No, this is English. This is all English. There is a version in Hebrew also. There's a version in French also, I think. But no, this is English. This is Steinsaltz. Let me see if it's here. Yeah. Wait, hold on. To get in the right lighting here. You see it? Rabbi Adin Evan Yisrael Steinsaltz. It's gold, so it might be hard to read. Is it coming up? Can you see it? Okay.
Yes.
Anyway, what I did was they had an offer, a few years ago when they were reissuing this or issuing it. Not really reissuing. The other one looked a little different. So when they started issuing this version of it, maybe I don't know when the project started, maybe 5 years ago, maybe 6, 7 years ago. So they had a thing where the plan was that they were going to produce one volume every few years. Sorry, every few months, every 3 months or so. And each volume, they had a deal, because like a publication as it's going on price of like, I don't know, $35, maybe $35.
Wow.
So I'm like, $35 every 3 months. Like you don't feel, it's like a easy way to, and then you end up with a whole set of Talmud after a few years. It's like, that's a great way. I mean, if you purchase the whole thing, how many volumes? I think there's 40 volumes, and now each price, let's say it's $40 a piece. Now you're talking about $1,600. It's harder to put down $1,600 to buy a set of Talmud than $10 a month, essentially, as it's coming out.
Yeah.
So it's just, anyway, I don't know why this is relevant, but that was my experience in actually getting it. If I'm not mistaken, I actually spoke to the guy. Remember, I mentioned he stopped by, one of the people on the publishing team. So he came by last year, and I asked him about that, and he said they would be open to setting up that deal with people that want to buy it. I'm pretty sure he said that, because I mentioned how it was so easy to to jump in on that. So I think he said he would set that up, or they would be open to setting that up. So anyway, if anyone's interested, let me know. We're talking about Steinsaltz, and his one of his primary legacies is the Talmud. So yeah.
Is there something like in one volume to start?
I mean, you could start with the first volume, but not
necessarily.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. You mean like kind of like the Talmud.
Right.
Give me like a one volume best of.
Yeah.
I don't know. Nothing rings a bell immediately. That's a good idea, though. That would be a good idea. By the way, we are starting a Talmud course. I know we've had in the past, we had Rabbi Edelman teach a Talmud course. I've taught a Talmud course right before Passover. We did I don't know, 3 or 4 sessions on that. But starting soon, relatively soon, there's a new rabbi who moved to town from New York. He is a very acclaimed Talmud teacher, and we're in talks for him to teach a Talmud class. So I'm very excited about that. So stay tuned. And the goal would be kind of along those lines, to not like, start working through a whole book, but to kind of, take an idea, take a concept, take a topic, and work through it, and then on to the next one. But kind of like a best of, where you get a good feel of different topics, different styles, different analytical constructs, because the Talmud is very. You want to know about the Talmud, and I know some of you have studied Talmud before, but if I had to describe the Talmud, it's like, what is the Talmud? How does the Talmud work? When you're reading the Talmud, imagine you're reading a transcript from a very lively Jewish conversation. Imagine if somebody typed up everything. So it's not completely, but it's, you start somewhere, and then someone asks a question, and then someone says, what kind of question is that? You question the question, right? And then, but everything's in the Talmud, everything's recorded. It's not like, yeah.
That's what I was thinking with the Jewish Course of Why, when you asked, is it okay to ask questions? I mean, that's what the Talmud is. It's all
right. Yeah.
questions.
Yes. The whole thing is questions. Questions, and then maybe answers, hopefully answers. And false leads, and you have misdirections, and rabbis saying, I look at it this way, I look at it that way. And now let's figure out, what's your source, what's my source, what does the Torah say? Let's go. It's a beautiful thing. There's so many. It's so logical. It really sharpens the mind. It really does. If you study Talmud for a few years, you take a teenager, studies Talmud for a few years, they're ready for law school. I'm not even joking about that.
Yeah.
Like the way that you learn how to think with such an argument. When I say an argument, I don't mean like a logical, an argument. A logical argument means something, and you analyze it, you question it. whoever says that Jews are just like, followers of a bunch of sheep, study the Talmud. There's nothing that is just accepted. Are you kidding me? There's nothing that is not questioned, to the nth degree. Anyway, so yeah, thank you, Sandrine, for mentioning that.
Yeah.
I saw pictures before, a little bit earlier, of his of the funeral happening on the Mount Olives. So his memory should be for a blessing. He certainly leaves a legacy, leaves a very strong imprint on the world that he leaves behind. So, all right, with that, let's end with a positive note. Let's all have a wonderful Shabbos, and please God, be healthy, and like my grandfather always says, be healthy, be wealthy, and be wise. Shabbat Shalom all. Take care.